Hey, what's going on, y'all? This is Aaron Burr from the Thought Doctrine, and you're listening to episode number 7 of the Aaron Burr broadcast. And on today's show, I decided I wanted to bring a guest on, and what I was aiming to do was to try to pluck from society like your average Joe, hardworking American, supporting their family, getting the bills paid, and just see how what their viewpoints are on the current situation moving forward. And today I brought on my friend John. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey Aaron, thank man. I do appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate the invite first off, and saying I'm a hardworking American. That's yeah, I guess that could be true. Paying the bills, I don't know about that, man. Just like any other average American, you struggle to make ends meet on a daily basis. And not everybody lives paycheck to paycheck, and I sure don't either. But at the end of the day, you're working for a common goal and trying to get where we need to go. So yeah, I do appreciate the invite, man. And you and I talk about your show quite a bit, and we have a lot of conversations, generally a little more candid than we probably will be on this call today.
For sure.
But absolutely, my views are reality is if you don't mind me getting into that is
Yeah, no,
just so
please.
everybody understands where I'm coming from
Mm-hmm.
is yeah, it's so hard for me to really put myself in I'm a stark conservative, I'm right wing, or I'm super left wing, or I'm moderate. Dude, it depends on what time it is, man. It depends on what's going on in the world. Depends on what the topic is. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a prime example. My daughter, who's 20-year-old college student, hated Trump, thought Trump was a horrible, horrible president, but couldn't give me a reason why. Couldn't tell me why she thought he was a horrible president.
Mm-hmm.
And I just tell her, so, well, that's because you probably get your news from Facebook or from, some other social media, or, you're hearing it from your friends. And, but I also understood her views too. She's funny because she is a huge proponent of not raising the minimum wage, even though she
Hmm.
works for minimum wage. Because she knows, she said, Dad, if they raise a minimum wage, guess what? I'm going to be out of a job because I'm a part-time student.
Yep.
They're not going to keep me around if they raise a minimum wage. I'm not the person they're going to keep. And then what happens when they raise prices to meet that minimum wage? Then people don't come to our store and shop.
Mm-hmm.
So she gets that part. So she's
That's
really
good.
funny in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you start getting into social issues, boy, I'll tell you what, man, everybody should be let into the country. We should take all she takes that give me your tired and poor, to heart,
Mm-hmm.
man. She wants
Mm-hmm.
every single beating heart to help out people. And I love her for that. But that's kind of where I stand, it's kind of I try to look at all the different views on how people are and what's going on in the world. But I'm not real strong towards one way or another, but I definitely do have some opinions.
All right. Well, so where would you say you fall on, like, predominantly? Has there been one party you've tended to vote for over the years?
I've definitely voted Republican
Okay.
majority of the time, and I apologize if you guys hear something in the background. I've got, like you
A
said
house.
earlier,
Yeah.
I have a house full of children, so,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but uh, uh, but I voted Republican for majority of it. When I do talk about where I stand, I am government needs to stay the hell out of the way. That's
Okay.
not their job. Their
Mm-hmm.
job is to not run your life. Their job is to not tell you what to do. I can't stand it. Like I just it drives me nuts when I hear things like I don't know if you recall, this has been a few years ago, but New York City banned 32-ounce sodas.
Yep. Yep.
It's like, who are you? If I want to drink a 32-ounce soda and be out of shape and overweight, that's my decision. It's not the government's job to tell me that. And so that is one thing that I'm stand very, very hard for is that I do not want the government telling me what to do, how to live my life.
Okay.
So
So I know. So just to play devil's advocate there. So what well, at least what certain politicians will say is that your decision to partake in unhealthy habits create a public health situation where the taxpayers and has it cover your situation, or at least cover these people in these situations, and therefore you're a burden on the rest of us. Therefore, they have a right to tell you to limit you on certain things like that. That's basically
Yeah.
what the argument is. What's your response to that?
My response is I pay for everything I do.
Mm-hmm.
My medical insurance is paid for by me. My
Mm-hmm.
employer may pay a little bit of it, but at no point is the government paying for my medical insurance. I have never gone to the government one day and asked, will you give me money so I can be unhealthy?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely not. Now, are there people in this world that do? Sure, but that still doesn't give you the right. And I'm against the government giving out free health care. I'm against the government telling people that they deserve to have health care. I don't believe that. I believe that people need to earn what they get. I
Mm-hmm.
believe that you have to be a true society. What's the word I'm looking for? A non-burden to society, a
Mm-hmm.
contributor to society is probably a better word to say.
Yeah.
You should be out there working and not relying on other people, not relying on a handout. I have not gone more than, I would have to say, right when I got out of the military. Just a little bit of my background: I am former military.
Mm-hmm.
When I got out of the military, I was probably about 2 weeks without a job, and
Mm-hmm.
I was looking for a job right when I got out. And from the time I was 16, that is the longest time I've never had a job.
Mm-hmm.
It was 2 weeks from the time I got out of the military before I started working again. So, you know, I I don't believe in handouts. I don't believe in free healthcare. I don't believe in welfare. I do think that there are times that people need help. And I
Okay, so I
get,
was going to say, well, do you believe in a basic social safety net?
look, I believe in people fall on hard times.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. I get it. When, like, for example, 2020, prime example of people falling on hard times.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't due to them deciding that they didn't want to do it.
For
That was
sure.
due to the fact that these restaurants are closing down or these stores were closing down. My daughter, works for a retail outlet, and she couldn't work. So
Mm-hmm.
she was getting unemployment. And I'll tell you what, and I understand why people want to stay on unemployment. She was making 3 times as much on unemployment than she made when she was working regular jobs.
Sad. Yeah.
It is. It
Mm-hmm.
is. And so that's the problem is when we start allowing people to enjoy these, oh, well, it's free. Everybody thinks it's free. It's free. No, somebody else is paying for that. And that's what I tried to explain to my daughter one day. I said, I pay for that.
Yeah.
Your mom, your dad, your uncle, your grandparents, your brother who's still working, they pay for you to be on unemployment.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, and it may not show you, that's not like I'm getting a bill for your unemployment, but at the end of the day, that's where it comes from.
Nothing's free for sure.
No. And that's what drives me nuts. Oh, well, everybody deserves to go to college for free. No, they don't. No, they don't.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you want to go to college and you want to better yourself, then you'll work just as hard as the person sitting next to you that paid for every single credit hour that they earn.
Mm-hmm.
So I just have a hard time with the handouts and people just thinking that everything should be handed to them.
I mean, I'm right there with you on that one for sure. So, what is your opinion on the last 4 years with Trump at the helm? What's your opinion on that? Does he fall in line with what you're saying? Do you think he supported everything you just said?
I'm so torn about Trump. And
Okay.
the reason I'm torn about Trump is I think Trump was a great person for the country from a business standpoint. I
Okay.
think a lot of people missed what Trump did for the country because of all the what is that a lot of people, you hear the term Trump derangement syndrome.
TDS. Yep.
Yeah, people are just like, oh my gosh, Trump is so horrible. He's racist. Oh, he's a fascist. He's this. He's this.
Mm-hmm.
But people missed that he did a lot of great things for this country. He got rid of probably one of the worst things in the history of the world where the government says you will have health insurance, or we will fine you for not having health insurance.
Yeah. Yep.
That, oh my gosh, if anything, that is something that scares me to death that's going to come back. But the economy has been great over the last 4 years. Yes, well, people are like, well, everybody lost their jobs in 2020. That's not because of Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Trump was not responsible for coronavirus. Trump was not responsible for. I don't think. I'm sorry. I would have a hard time believing that any sitting president could have handled what happened any better than Trump did. Maybe they could have. Maybe they couldn't. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to what Trump did for the country from a business standpoint, I really, really appreciated the work that he put in. The problem is Trump was out there on a ledge by himself.
He was.
You know, the from 2016 to 2018, it was a Republican. It was a red wave, man. It was all Republican.
Very true.
Republican-controlled House, Republican-controlled Senate. And what did we do? What
Nothing.
did the Republicans? Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. Why? Because everybody's like, oh, Trump this, Trump that. Trump's not one of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so they let an opportunity slip through their hands to maybe impact some changes. But the tax breaks that he's given, everybody's like, oh, it's only helping the rich. I completely disagree in that. Trust me, I'm not rich. I make under $100,000 a year. And reality is my taxes over the last 2 years were less than they were 4 years ago. And I've been about the same salary range for about the last 7 years now. And my taxes have dramatically decreased over the last couple of years.
Wow.
And I appreciate that. And I haven't done anything different. It's not like I'm out there putting in 25% in my 401k or, trying to find some different kind of ways to get around taxes.
Mm-hmm.
It's just they've gone down, and I've appreciated that. And at the end of the day, though, the biggest problem when I said that I'm kind of torn about Trump.
Yeah.
Aaron, I hear this a lot, and I think this is why people were disenfranchised with Trump. Shut up. Mm-hmm. There are times he just needed to shut up. I'm a huge, huge sports fan. I mean, like when you and I were talking about being on this, discussion and having these talks, I told you, I said, Aaron, I'm not savvy politically. I don't study a whole bunch of political views. I don't read a whole bunch of political documents, but I can tell you who won the 1985 World Series and who was the MVP.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what I know. And at the end of the day, one of the examples I had with wanting Trump to shut up is...
You're talking about like Twitter? Is that what you're referring to here? Or
yeah,
what?
Just Twitter, like all the time, just constantly in people's faces. He's always needed. I mean, I cannot remember a president ever being in front of a camera or being on the news, having some kind of news press conference, or sending out some kind of messages on Twitter more than this guy. And it just bothered me.
Okay, so here I'll bring up a couple points. So I agree with you on the Twitter thing. He wasn't helping his cause by using Twitter constantly, and it gave the media and the left just opportunity after opportunity to shed negative light on the whole, on every whatever the issue was. It gave them that opening to attack him and just bring on more nonsense, and then it would drive him to make a response on that, and it was just this continual cycle that went back and forth. So I'll concede that point for sure, that he definitely was overdoing it on the Twitter feed or whatever, for sure. But I don't know if you can make the argument, at least not 100%, that it necessarily disenfranchised or whatever so many people, given the fact that he gained voters in 2020. He raised the amount of voters he had. Had there been a significant drop, and then I think you could use that argument, like, well, yeah, I mean, look, he was obviously pissing off all these people and annoying all these people, so he lost all these voters. But the fact is, he got the most votes of a sitting president in the history of the country. right?
I don't disagree with you, but
Yeah.
the problem is this is, and people, you and I had this discussion a while back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because you and I were talking, and I've said this to a few people as well. There's nothing that he said that would have not made me want to vote for him.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And if you were going to vote for Trump, you were going to vote for Trump. Just like if you're going to vote for Biden, you're going to vote for Biden, no matter what.
For sure.
Okay. Because, you have Biden up there saying God knows what half the time, not even sure what country he's in, seems like.
Yeah.
But that didn't dissuade people from voting for him.
True.
Okay.
So the anti-Trump vote was big.
But
still.
let me tell you this. Yeah, exactly. You're right. He gained more voters, but guess who also gained more voters? The Democrats. Because if you look at the last 12 elections, okay, and I did look at this, okay, and I'm not 100% sure, but so if I'm wrong, I'm sure your listeners can call me out and say I'm wrong, but Obama didn't get near the votes that Biden got in this election.
True.
Clinton didn't get near the votes. Now, granted, we have more people.
Yeah.
Okay, and I know that there's a big argument. Well, 5 million people. Like a friend sent me a meme saying, yeah, I'm so mad that my wife voted for Biden. I'm never going to visit her grave again. I get it.
Well, the voter fraud is an issue, right?
I get it. Yeah, there is. But was there really a 10 million to 15 million vote difference in voter fraud? I have a hard time believing that. I'm not saying there isn't. I'm just saying I have a hard time believing that. And so if you look at it, so when you say that, yes, he didn't lose voters, but I think because of his rhetoric,
he didn't gain voters.
He didn't gain. Well, he gained voters because of what he did in the country. Okay. Wouldn't have voted for Democrats in the past, came out and voted because they were trying to get rid of Trump. The past elections, nobody cared who the president was. Yes, people didn't like Bush. That's why a big reason why I think Obama won in 08. It was an anti-Bush vote because McCain was just another George Bush.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Another Neil.
Romney lost in 2012 because the conservatives didn't like him.
Yeah.
They didn't go vote for him. I mean, let's be honest. I think Obama actually had less votes in 2012 than he had in 2008. But
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Reality is the Republicans didn't put up a true conservative until Trump. Okay. And the reason Trump won in 2016 is because lying Hillary, man. I mean, Hillary was not the person that people wanted in as president. It's not because Trump was the best candidate. It's because it was an anti-Hillary vote. People, it's kind of like I equate it to if you work in a restaurant. You hear this old adage, if you give somebody great service, they're going to go tell 2 people. If you give somebody bad service, they're going to go tell 20. And that's the thing it's people were so upset that they got out and voted because they wanted to make sure Trump didn't get in office. Trump got more votes because people that wanted Trump went out and voted. But reality is and the voter fraud could have definitely been a part of it. I mean, I know that there has been some proof of some voter fraud, but if you go back and look, and I'd love to go maybe do some homework before I start spouting off, but I'm almost positive that Biden got more votes as a Democratic candidate than any candidate since Reagan or Nixon. I would have to go back and look.
That might be true. So, all right, I'm gonna dissect it a little bit with everything you said. So, going back to 2016, who was it? You said he wasn't the best candidate, but it was an anti-Hillary vote.
Absolutely.
I'll go out a little bit further, and I'll say that Hillary was more a representative of the status quo, and she represented the establishment, and Trump was like bucking the system. He was a FU to the establishment, and that's why he got the votes that he got, and the reason why he won. All right, to me, it was more of it was like almost like a resistance or rebellion type vote, right? to the system.
Just like Reagan when he got elected.
True.
You know,
But I think Trump was even more of that. I think Trump was even more of
agree.
that. And then in 2020, the situation, it was still along those lines where that's why he gained voters, right? He still was a middle finger to the system. But, I mean, really, we could go on and talk about this one thing for hours. But at least when we talk about the voter fraud and the Twitter feed, right? So I guess the way I could sum all this up is saying that he gained voters because of what he did in office and because of the symbol of the like FU to the system, and he did have a lot of gains that he actually pulled through, right? And so he gained voters, but the Twitter thing, I don't think he lost any votes because of it, but he did not gain any more on top of the people voting for his accomplishments. He didn't gain anything beyond that, if that makes any sense.
I agree. But I think Democrats have gained voters because of it.
True. That's very true. And here's the thing is, when it comes to voter fraud, and you look at it only really matters in the highly contested states and precincts, right? And so those margins are actually extremely small, right? If you look at them, and some are like, I think one's like Georgia was maybe 14,000 or something like that, 12,000. I think it was 12,000 something in Pennsylvania, and and I forget which state it was, but it was one where it's only 30, 40,000 or something like that. The margins are extremely close, right? And so what I'm saying is the voter fraud actually argument could go either way, right? In the sense that they only needed so much voter fraud to push Biden over the finish line. You see what I'm saying? It was already so close that even if there was fraud that made a difference, they only needed so much because the margins were already really close. I don't think it's, in my viewpoint, I don't think Trump won this massive landslide and then they came with these massive amount of fraudulent votes. I think it was really close, and then in some situations there may have been voter fraud to push Biden ahead just that much to win. You see what I'm saying? Like, I don't think the breakdown is so far away and that the fraud had to be so massive, so this extraordinary amount of votes had to come in for Biden to overtake. I think it was already super close, and if there was fraud, they only needed so much of it to win.
Oh, I agree, but that's where you're also talking about the Electoral College. And, it's close in that sense. Now, I'm a big proponent of the Electoral College because I don't think that 3 cities should determine the presidency.
Absolutely.
Like, I was trying to explain that to my daughter. I bring up my daughter again.
Mm-hmm.
She was like, Dad, I think the popular vote should win. And I said, so you think Los Angeles should determine who the president is? She goes, well, what do you mean? I said, look at Los Angeles. Take Los Angeles out of the equation. Let's say Los Angeles did not vote for the president. She's like, okay. And I said, do you realize that the Republicans would have won the popular vote by almost 2 million votes?
Exactly.
Without LA, without one city.
Yeah. Exactly.
So again, I mean, Biden won by over 7 million votes. But I see what you're saying. I do.
So I want to mention something you just said. All right. So, and you know me, in no way, shape, or form am I criticizing your daughter or anything like that. But her viewpoint, right? To me, the fact that you had to explain that to her that's the problem, is a failure of the education system where we can't even teach our kids these basic fundamentals of how the U.S. government is set up. You know what I'm saying? Like, the fact that you have to explain that, hey, this we don't have at least we're not supposed to have a national government. We have a federal republic, right? And the fact that, it's the states that determine the president, not necessarily the people per se, right? And this is one of the checks and balances on the system. And the fact that she represents that generation, right? Because, this is not the first time I've heard this type of thing, right? So, to me, it's even kind of... And the sad thing is people our age and older that will hold the same exact viewpoint, you know what I'm saying?
Don't get me started on education.
But like, the fact that you have to explain that to anybody, really, to me, is pretty mind-boggling. Like, people do not understand. We do not have or at least we're not supposed to have a national government. I know that in reality, it's kind of, well, it's not kind of, but it has turned into that, right? But we're supposed to have a federal republic, right? So people don't understand that, right?
Well,
And
but that takes me into what you and I were talking about earlier.
mm-hmm.
Okay. Or before we even got on this call. And that is, you had mentioned status quo with Hillary. Mm-hmm. You said, well, she's status quo. She's status quo. What's status quo? Explain to me what you think status quo is, because I'll tell you what I think status quo is.
Yeah, okay? Go ahead. Go first. Go first.
Status quo to me is we continually allow the government to tell us what we would need to do, and we continually allow people to believe that the best way to vote for the political parties, is who's going to give me the most free stuff. Who's going to let me vote? If I vote for you, what do I get? It reminds me of like when we were running for president of our high school, student council. If you vote for me, I promise I will give you guys, we will get an hour and a half for lunch instead of an hour and 25 minutes. Or I promise we're going to give you whatever stupidity that these kids think that they can do.
Yeah.
We hear it. Well, if you vote for me, I'm going to make sure everybody goes to college. I'm going to get rid of all your student loans that you went out and got. And now I'm going to forgive that. I'm not going to make you responsible. Mm-hmm. Basically, what they want is people want to vote away their responsibilities. And that's what I see status quo. We get that all the time. Now we have a wave. We have our waves of people. Okay. Yeah. In 2016, people went against status quo. Mm-hmm. Okay. But here's the problem. It goes back to, let's look at the total votes. 81 million people voted for Biden. 74 million people voted for Trump. Guess how many people voted for Hillary? 61 million. Mm-hmm. 60. So you're talking 20 million more Democrats came out and voted? I don't think so.
No.
20 million more people that were like, oh my gosh, I can get free stuff, because guess what? Now it's even more prevalent, especially with 2020 with coronavirus, with COVID. People were, oh, you need to give me stuff. You need to give me free stuff. I can't live. The answer was not open the government back up, not open the economy. It's give me stuff.
Yeah.
And so status quo to me is people continuing to allow people to vote, to allow people to let them live to how they, the government tells people how they should live. Okay. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, who's gonna change it? You have somebody like Trump who tried to come in. He can't do it. He's one man.
Yeah. So, all right. So I'll give you my status quo. I think because I 100% agree with what you're saying in terms of the people in general, right? At least, and say not all the people, but a majority of, I don't even want to say majority of people, but just a large percentage of the population, voting population at least, is exactly what you're saying, right? And I've mentioned that before. It's when people realize that they just have to vote for whoever gives them the most stuff, then that's like the lowest common denominator of people out there, right? And they don't want. So I guess the way I see status quo is from the other angle, right? Where they definitely, the people in charge, the ruling class, that's what they want, right? They don't want people to think critically. They want people just to want things, right? And to not use any kind of critical thinking at all. It's just it's what's the word? Pandering to that lowest common denominator. When I say status quo, I mean it's a combination of certain elements that come together and form the ruling class. It's the ultra, rich elite, like the big business interests, the transnational corporations, like the corporate oligarchs, the corporatists, and the Federal Reserve, like the banksters, and the military-industrial complex, which has so many names. Military-industrial complex / deep state / permanent bureaucracy, permanent government, and all those things interlace and overlap, and they basically create this just one. It's the uniparty. It's really like the parties at the very end of the day are just illusions, right? Just illusions, and there's different factions swaying back and forth, and like you said, there's different waves. But at the very end of the day, the status quo is, it's the swamp, it's the blob, it's the massive bureaucracy, it's the administrative state. It's all those things just combined into one. It's the cabal, like whatever you want to call it. But it's like this this overbearing structure that's dictating how things are going to be, right? And Trump represented a buck to that system. But I personally, and I know there's a lot, I know a lot of Trump supporters out there, and they wouldn't even appreciate me saying this, but I think he was actually a very, what's the word here? Just a very, he wasn't the right guy per se, right? He was a very imperfect representation of that person to buck the system, right? I supported him in his efforts, right? But I don't think he was, he had qualities that would be necessary to be that person. I'm not saying that he didn't have those qualities. Like, he was a self-made man. He was an a-hole, right? And he had those business instincts, and he was talking the right things when it came to trade and stuff like that. But at the same time, he was very imperfect overall, right? He just wasn't, like, the people who love him, but the people that hate him really hate him, right? And so when I say status quo, it's that that permanent bureaucracy. Trump came in, and he was, although imperfect, he was that, hitting the brakes on the system, right? But like you said, he was the lone man on the ledge, because the entire system, like the establishment, the Washington establishment and the party establishments are part of that status quo, and they were very anti-Trump. They did not help him out at all, and every time he leaned on those people, because he took a lot of those guys into his administration, just like Biden is now, and he leaned on them, and all they ever did was screw him over, and which in effect screwed us over, right? So even though Trump did get some things done, there was a lot more that could have been done. And when I reflect back on the whole situation, I don't even know if Trump did have the full means to get his agenda done. I don't know if I would have been on board with everything anyways, because after 4 years of Trump, we are closer to socialism and statism tenfold than we've ever been, right? So, and again, he's a lone man. I get he's a lone man on the ledge. He had no help, but I just don't know if he was the perfect. I guess that was the word vessel. I don't know if he's the perfect vessel for at least what I want, which is a reduction of this huge power structure, returning power to the people. He talked that, but I don't know if even if he had full, the full means to do that, I'm not 100% convinced he would have made that happen. He definitely would still be better than, what we have now, or what we're about to have now. But I just don't know if he's that perfect vessel that a lot of people made him out to be.
So you mentioned socialism, and that's a very interesting topic, and I appreciate your thoughts on the status quo. The problem with socialism is this, and I'm going to kind of play devil's advocate for you a little bit here, Aaron, because I agree with you.
Yeah.
In the fact that I think we've been moving towards socialism since the Great Depression, to be honest with you.
Oh, for sure.
Since we started getting into welfare and giving people something for nothing, that gets into socialism. Okay.
Absolutely, 100% on that. Yeah.
And so while we want to be a capitalistic country, while we want to believe that capitalism is the way to go, socialism is always going to creep in everywhere. Okay, no matter what. I don't care. And every country, I don't care if you're a socialist country or not, there's a level of socialism to everything. Okay, let's just,
for sure,
that's always going to be the case.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay? But when you start talking about that kind of different things, when you start talking about socialism, I think it's very, very interesting, because prime example to me of socialism, all right, it's probably not socialism, it's probably a bad example, but I do want to talk about people getting something for nothing. Okay. Mm-hmm. Prime example, COVID relief checks.
Absolutely.
All right. COVID relief checks. People are getting COVID relief checks, and we're sitting there saying, this is ridiculous. I cannot believe that the government's out there giving people all this money. My wife got $2,400. Do you think we gave it back? No.
Yeah.
Put that in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we put it in a savings account. Not going to lie.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's where the rubber meets the road at the end of the day. We could sit here and fight all we want. Well, this shouldn't happen. This shouldn't happen. But the minute somebody puts an extra $2,000 in your bank account, you can be like, all right, I'll give it back because this shouldn't happen. There might be some people who do.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you said it at the
beginning. What's your point,
We're
though?
just trying to make ends meet.
Okay.
So why would I give money back that's being given to me? I'm going to end up paying for it anyway, right?
So what's your point, though? Are you saying that
I'm saying that while we want to go against socialism, it is ingrained in people to accept something for nothing.
Oh, of course. That's human nature.
It is. Well, that's my point.
Yeah.
So socialism is a human nature instinct, okay?
For sure.
It is. It's the person begging on the side of the road. It's the person that is, look, I know we run into hard times, and I know I'm making socialism a lot more simple than it really truly is. I get it. Socialism isn't just getting something for nothing.
Well, I have a counter. So I mean,
go ahead.
Okay, so my counter is, it is human nature, right? And socialism has that. That's why socialism and socialists try to take that moral high ground, right? Because it is human nature to help your fellow, human beings when they're down. That's like at least for the majority of people, right? Like, you want to help that person, or even then, if you're given money, whether you absolutely need it or not, I mean, it's human nature to accept it. And because whether you're, even if you're not broken on the side of the street, you could use that 2,400 or 600 or 2,000 for something, right? But my counter is, what makes socialism in reality, because when you take that to the next step, where does that money come from? Because it comes from two or three sources, right? Either it comes from, like you're talking about before, where it comes from someone else's pocketbook, someone else's bank account. And if that person decided, I don't want to give you that money on my bank account, and he's like, I don't want to pay these taxes, people with guns will eventually show up to his house and force him to at gunpoint or throw him in prison. That is the reality if you take it to the extreme. So that's why, to me, in reality, socialism isn't that moral, because of that fact right there. And that goes with our current system. That goes with just taxation in the first place. But socialism will be the standard for everything, right? Then the other two things are, you print the money in a situation that you're bankrupting the generation of our grandkids, where the economy will eventually completely collapse because the dollar will be worth nothing and we'll have hyperinflation. Or we borrow the money and now we're paying interest to Federal Reserve and these banks, or to China, whoever, and it's just a cycle continues. You got to print more, borrow more, tax more to continue the cycle, and it just eventually ends up to financial ruin. I mean, if you just look at history, it's what I'm saying has happened time and time again. There's not some fantasy stuff I'm coming up with. You could just look back. I mean, it's happening currently in Venezuela as we speak. They're eating rats and stuff over there. That is the path we're on. And that is my argument. That's my counter towards, everybody's going to accept free stuff. Well, of course they will. It's human nature. And of course you're going to be like, oh yeah, screw socialism. And then I get your point. Like, oh, screw this. And then the check comes. You're like, oh, cool, 2,400. I get your point, because that's human nature. And so you got to take a step back and then look at the whole situation. And whether you're doing that or not, whether people are doing that or not, it's still leading down the same path. And it's still the same principles are still in play. So I know that's my take on it.
I don't disagree with you. And like I said, I was kind of playing devil's advocate, because I try to teach my kids about socialism all the time when they were younger. I can't remember who, that was somebody on the radio years ago, and I always use this analogy when it comes to socialism, especially just to simplify it. As I've always told my kids, they go, Dad, what's socialism? I don't understand what it is. I said, all right, Halloween's coming up. You go out, you go trick-or-treating. but before you go trick-or-treating, you work 6 hours on your costume. You make this cool costume. You go out there, and then you go trick-or-treating for 4 hours. You're out there in the cold, and I live in Colorado, and we're out there in the cold, and it's probably snowing because it's Halloween, and it always seems to snow on Halloween. And 4 hours later, you come back with a big bag of candy. As soon as you get back to your front door, there's 2 people standing there with their hands out, and I make you give them each a third of your candy. And they didn't do anything. But it's what's fair. That's what's equal. Because that child deserves to have just as much candy as you do, even though they didn't work for it. And they're like, well, that sucks. I was like, well, that's socialism. And again, very simplified.
Yeah.
And, I tell them, I said, well, they say, well, Dad, what if we don't do that? And I said, then I'll ground you. I'm going to take it anyway.
Exactly.
I'm going to take it and I'm going to give it anyway. So it doesn't matter what you want.
Exactly. So, I mean, I'll go for it. I'd be like, oh, you don't want it? Well, then I'm going to call the police and they're come and put you in jail.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, but like I said, I mean, at the end of the day, I am completely against socialism. Socialism scares me because I agree with you that we are just detrimenting our future of our youth. And we are, I joke around with my family and I tell everybody, they're like, well, it could happen in the next 20 years anyway, Dad. I said, I'm 43. I'm not living past 50, so I'm good. I don't really care.
But just come back on what we were saying though is you're scared of socialism. You don't want it to come. I don't want it to come. But my point, especially when I mentioned the status quo, and you kind of said it too, is it's already here.
Yeah.
Right. Like we're not fighting. It's like what we're fighting for. I'm not fighting the current system. I'm not necessarily fighting for either. The current system is rigged and corrupt and has all kinds of government, subsidies going into it, right? Like the economy is already, to a very large part, is already rigged, and all the government contracts and all the huge, the bureaucracy, right, and all the corporate welfare and the regular welfare, right? Like we already live largely in a socialist system. Not only do I want to stop it from growing, but I want to go, I want to get rid of it, right?
I agree, but how do you do?
Well, I mean,
how do we do it? I guess, and I'm not sitting here thinking that we're going to solve world problems right now on this call. Yeah. But I agree with you. But again, and let's forget voter fraud. I don't want to talk about voter fraud. 81 million people voted for it, Aaron.
I agree. Yeah.
I mean, so you have to fight 81 million other people. Now, you could say, well, 74 million people voted against it. Okay. I agree with you. I'm there. I'm there. So we're at odds right now. Exactly. And I hear all the talk, as a guy who goes to work every day. And I mean, when you and I were talking earlier, you said, hey, what are you doing? I said, well, I just got done working. It's Saturday. I work 2 jobs, man. Yeah. And so, yeah, I hear people all the time. Oh, yeah, this we're going to go to a civil war. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. No, that's not the answer. Yeah. The answer isn't to go out and kill the 81 million people that voted for.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm there with you.
Yes. Would it be, but the problem is you're absolutely right, because guess what? Even if we only had that 74 million people that voted, those are the people that were deciding. Well, we've been moving towards this. This didn't happen on this election. It didn't happen January 6th when they stormed the Capitol, quote unquote. Okay. Nothing. Socialism, the path towards socialism started 70 years ago.
Exactly.
80 years ago. And so we are not, it doesn't matter Republican or Democrat. The problem is people are people, and they're going to vote for what the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. I mean, let's be honest. If somebody was to come up to me right now, today, and say, all right, John, we know you work 2 jobs. You make this much a year. We're going to double your salary if you sit at home, but by you sitting at home, 4 other people have to go and work 2 jobs to pay for that. I don't know those 4 other people, so what do I care? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, what does that matter to me? I get mine, right?
I mean, it comes down to morality.
Well, yeah. Well, don't get me started on morality. I mean, this is the United States of America, not the United States of morality. and reality is while there are a lot of moral people in this country, there's a lot of people that are in it to win it for themselves. They're not in it for other people. And you said it earlier. Well, that's what socialism is. It's being billed as helping others.
Yeah.
It's being billed as making sure everybody's equal. And capitalism is that mean corporation that doesn't want to give their people money, and they're going to bankrupt people, and reality is socialism hurts everybody. And because the rich don't get richer, the poor only get poorer. Because guess what? Just like raising minimum wage, just like anything else, you know what? You raise minimum wage, well, the people that are control these businesses, the people that determine cost, they're only going to increase the cost. They're only going to reduce their personnel working for them. I mean, it's not there is no morality in everybody. It's not a utopia. Okay, and we're not in a utopian society where everybody's equal. It's just not. That's why you have to work for what you have. That's why I work hard. That's why I want to teach my kids to go get an education. But at the same point, there's times it just feels you're just spinning your wheels.
So the way I see it is, you said 81 million people voted for Biden, 74 million voted for Trump. Now, it breaks down to total control freaks versus people that want to be left alone. And I would say there's probably overlap in that 81 and 74 million people. And the people that want the handouts, at the end of the day, those are also control freaks. Because to get that handout, someone else needs to be controlled or whatever to get that handout. So you have 2 factions that basically fight over who has control. But in reality, they're both moving in the exact same direction.
And I guess that kind of begs to the next area we kept talking about. And you know what? We're accusing Biden of being a socialist. At no point has Biden actually ever come out for socialism. Now, Kamala Harris has never come out for socialism. However, if you look at her track record, she's voted more socialist ways than Bernie Sanders, who is a pronounced socialist. So it's very interesting in that sense. So I guess over the next couple of years, to me, is really going to tell. Like I was talking to my brother, and he believes in his mind that majority of people, the Democrats, so to speak, that are in the Congress, not all, because there are the AOCs of the world. Let's not get into that because I just don't have enough brain power to deal with that. But the AOCs of the world that are just Green New Deals and everybody should get everything for free. But he believes that majority of the people in the Congress are moderate. They're not for socialism. They don't want socialism. Okay. I don't know how you feel about that. I mean, we have been talking about moving towards a social. Do I ever truly think that we're going to be Venezuela? I don't know. I don't know. I don't ever truly think that we're going to go full on socialist in this country, at least not in my lifetime, and I hope not in anybody that I know lifetime. But at the end of the day, as we start looking at how Biden starts building his cabinet and what he's putting together, to me, this is Obama 2.0.
It is Obama 2.0 for sure.
I mean, and reality is Obama took over the presidency in 2008 or 2009, technically, but in 08 and November of 08, when he won the election, amongst one of the worst economic times this country has ever seen. Mm-hmm. Okay. The economy did not get worse under Obama. The economy did not get better necessarily per se under Obama. Not great. I think it improved over from with Trump.
Incrementally.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, do we really think that Biden is going to take us in a socialist path?
Is that your question?
Yeah.
Okay,
Do you really truly believe that Biden is going to take us down that socialist path?
Okay, all right. So with Biden, he has always been a moderate, and that's why he ended up getting the nomination from the Democrats in the first place. Because all those guys are pretty far to the left or pretty socialist. He was the most moderate one, and that's why the establishment picked him. Now, with saying that, a phrase I should have used earlier had this huge explanation for the status quo. The status quo can be in one phrase. That's the welfare warfare state. And Biden, he represents the welfare warfare state. And Kamala, even more so. Do I think that Biden is going to push us himself into this like socialist nightmare? No. Do I think the Congress is full of moderates? No. I think the leadership, especially of the Congress, is pretty far to the left. The AOC and the squad they don't have full control, but they have enough control with Sanders to push legislation like the Green New Deal, which is a very socialistic bill, and they will, and I think they will push that through Congress, and it'll get to the Senate, and Kamala Harris will be the deciding vote if we're even to go to 50-50, but there's going to be plenty of Republicans that are going to vote for it anyways, or at least enough of them. They only need a couple. And the question is, will he push back on that or say no? No, he'll sign it. So whether he's, in a socialist or a radical leftist himself, no, he's the status quo. He represents, a complete return to the welfare warfare state. That's who he is. And is he going to say no to when the far left elements in the Congress get the rest of the Congress to push through a bill like the Green New Deal? Even if they water it down a little bit, it'll still be bad. He's going to sign it. And then if Kamala Harris is the president, then she'll actively try to get it done either way, right? But my point is, I don't think the Congress is full of moderates. At least it doesn't matter because the leadership is being dictated by a few that definitely are not moderate. Even if they don't get it done right away, there's going to be a system in place where they can get it done.
Okay.
And I could be wrong. I'm just saying this is how I see it, though. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and you know what? And that's the great thing about the country we live in for now.
Yeah.
And that is we can share these views. And we can decide, we can have the ability to say what we want to say.
For now.
You and I had this conversation.
Yeah.
I've never heard as much in the last 4 years about these Yahoo people that just because they have a platform on major social media or news, like these idiotic actors and actresses and athletes, talk and say such things like they're going to blow up the White House or they're going to do this or they're going to do this and not get in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
I just like, you got to be kidding me. Anyways, I don't want to go down that path. The path I do want to talk about is you were talking, we mentioned the Congress, and I would like your opinion. There's a lot of talk. Now, the Senate, losing the Senate was not good for the Republicans. Okay.
For sure. Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. It really is. I think that again, unfortunately, I think that the runoff in Georgia again was another anti-Trump election for the Democrats, because I did my research on those candidates, and all four of them were not good. Even the sitting senator in Georgia was.
I agree with you there for sure. Yeah.
Was not good. So I was just like, it's kind of like, yeah, all right. It's not like we're losing anybody decent, but we didn't gain anybody decent either. Anyways, but so over the next 2 years, as you saw that the House actually gained quite a few seats that went Republican.
For sure.
Do you see that trend happening in 2022, or do you see it going even stronger back to a big blue wave?
That's a good question, because And that was a huge anomaly in this last election, the fact that, Trump, quote unquote, he lost, but there was a red wave. That's really, really odd, right?
Yeah.
And that's one thing that raised huge suspicions in the first place was how did the Republicans win all these House seats, or at least retain all these seats when there was projected to be a huge blue wave, right? But how do they retain these seats and win all these seats, and yet the top of the ticket went the other way? So that's already a huge oddity. And it's weird because you could say that, well, one reason they won all these seats was because Trump was on the ballot, right? And then you could say one reason that the Georgia senators lost was because Trump was not on the ballot, right? So when we look at the situation in the next 2 years, traditionally, you would have a situation where a president wins, the election, and 2 years later, in the midterms, it's a pretty historic thing to happen where he gets kind of rebuked and the other party wins a bunch of seats too. Or they win a bunch of seats. It's kind of a, rebuking what happened in the last 2 years, especially
what happened in 96 with Clinton.
It's what happened in 2010 with Obama. So, especially when Democrats, but you could say any party, when they go, when they try to, pass their agenda, radical agenda, or at least perceived as a radical agenda, that there's just blowback and they vote for the other party to basically put the president in check. And so the question is, will that happen in 2 years? Will the one party rule, which is what we're about to have, happen in the next 2 years, and they're basically gonna have full power to do whatever they want? Will there be a backlash in 2 years, and will the Republicans gain even more seats and probably take the House, and who knows, maybe take the Senate? Definitely a possibility, because traditionally that's how it would happen. But my concern is what I mentioned earlier. I don't know if it's that rosy of a picture, because so many people voted for Biden. There's so many people that voted for him that is it not a sign that is where the country is trending? I mean, you can make the argument either way. With the red wave, is that a sign we're trending red, or because Biden won, is that a sign we're? So I don't really know, but I don't think it's as easy to say. And one factor of that is, to a huge chunk of that 74 million, a huge chunk, and I've alluded to this before, they feel that the Republican Party has betrayed them in many, many ways. A lot of those people were not Republican voters to begin with, right? They only voted in that direction because of Trump. Those are the MAGA people. And now, and I would say that has always truly been the base of the Republican Party in reality, right? Meaning the MAGA people were the same people that were the Tea Party people, were the same people that were the Reagan people. You know what I mean? Like that chunk of people, a lot of them just stopped showing up. Like when Mitt Romney said conservatives didn't show up, those are the people that didn't show up, right? And now they showed up for Trump twice and brought in some new people. So what I'm saying is, you don't have necessarily the traditional Republican voter per se. And now you have, a lot of them feel that a lot of these Republicans betrayed Trump by not fighting for him in terms of the election, right? What happened on the 6th and all these other things where they felt that Republican elected officials did not come out strong enough to support Trump. And then, like we were telling you, like we were just saying earlier, Trump was on a ledge the whole time because the Republican establishment was never behind him, right? So is there not also going to be an internal backlash to the Republican Party itself? Will these people not go on and either sit on their hands or vote third party or try to have a new party created, right? There's been talks of this party called the Patriot Party that was huge on Parler before one reason probably why they shut Parler down. But there was this, movement for the Patriot Party, a MAGA type party, or just the fact that they won't vote Republican or won't vote at all. So that's why, I don't know, to me it's cloudy, because I feel like there could be, and my personal opinion, and I guess this is a question I could turn to you, because my personal opinion of the Republican Party in relation to everything I just said is, I think they're just a bunch of scoundrels, and a lot of them are they're a pathetic lot of people that I really could care less, right? I've said it before, while I despise the Democrats, I absolutely despise the Republicans, and and to me, they're only showing the last 4 years. They showed their true colors. They showed their true colors the last couple months. I'm not saying there aren't individuals here and there, but I could probably put them on one hand between the House and the Senate, and the rest of them are all trash. They're all garbage. So why? So I don't know. Like me myself, I'm not a supporter of the Republican Party, and I don't think I'm the only one that sits with this viewpoint.
No, I guess I understand what you're saying. I always used to joke around saying, the 1980 Democrats are the current day Republicans, and the Democrats have just gone further left. Reality is we Trump was the very first true conservative we've had in the office since Reagan, and even Reagan, while he had a lot of conservative values, he wasn't exactly conservative. Now you hear a lot of people talk about how the financially Trump was not conservative. He spent more money than a lot of presidents, and
I
so did
believe
Reagan.
that. I believe that too.
Yeah.
I believe that on both accounts. Yeah.
Yeah, and Reagan spent a lot of money too, but Reagan was also trying to fix what Carter did. But besides the point, when you said, you're kind of posing the question, do I support the Republican Party, or what's my opinion on it?
Yeah.
Aaron, I hate to say this, but I'm just sick and tired of politics in general.
Yeah.
I just there's days I get on and I start looking at different news outlets, and I always try to look at different websites, not just one. I always try to look at different ones just to kind of, try to gather my own opinions and facts. We have such a headline society where people see a headline and that's what they react to.
Yep.
They don't actually know what goes on. Okay. But just like, the whole January 6th thing, which, like I said, I don't even want to get into that topic, but reality is it's hard for me to really sit there and say, yes, I support it. No, I don't. I do think, and I think more than on one hand, people that are in the office. I think that people join the government, get into Congress, especially these younger people. Like example for Colorado, Lauren Boebert, whatever her name is.
Yeah.
I don't really know that much about her. She's a little loudmouth, but she I think that she's got a lot of good views, and I think that she can do a lot of good for the country. And I think that she's going to represent Colorado just fine. Don't get me started on Doug Lamborn.
Yeah.
I like Doug Lamborn. I do. I've met Doug Lamborn numerous times. That doesn't mean I don't like him as a person, but I just think that he's lost his way on what's right and what's wrong for this city. And so while I think that there's a lot of good things that people want to do when they join Congress, they get swallowed up by the system.
Swamp.
They get stuck in the swamp. Like that was one of the things that what Trump was running on. I'm going to drain the swamp. Well, I just think the swamp's gotten bigger.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
And reality is whether Trump was trying to drain the swamp or whether he was adding to the swamp, you can argue one or the other, depending on wherever you stand. And that's the thing I love about this country is people, oh my gosh, I hated Trump. I hate this. I hate this. I hate this. That's fine. You know what? That makes you who you are. Not a bad person. Sometimes not a good person, but everybody has those tendencies, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, when you start talking about where we're at and the political parties and where we're moving to, I would love to see the Republicans win the House in 2022. Not because I think the Republicans are going to do good for the country, but because the sad thing is it horrible that it's better if they don't do anything?
Oh, I agree with you there, 100%.
I mean, it's like, stop. It's almost better to just not reach across the aisle. I mean, we haven't had a budget pass since I was like 5. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard to tell what's going on and where we're at in this country. But, it's almost more dangerous to have a one-party rule and have everybody do everything. I mean, but at the same point, you and I were just complaining about it, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We were complaining about the fact that, well, in 2016 we had the House and the Senate; they didn't do crap.
It's true.
Why not? But now we're like, well, we don't want them to do anything. Hang on.
Well,
so
here's the thing with me personally is I feel like I've evolved even in the last 6 months, right? Like my views have changed in the last 3 months, right? Like I'm against one party rule, period. I would rather have a divided government at this point because that's what I'm saying is to me the Republicans are just as much trash as the Democrats, right? And even if we did have full control again, like the Republicans, and it was just like, all three branches, again, it's just two factions fighting for control and dictating to the other half, and in some cases punishing the other half like we see going on now. And it's just, I don't know, to me it's just not, I'd rather have a divided government. I'd rather have them do nothing. What I really want is to repeal and reduce, right? Repeal laws, reduce, and I'll probably never get that, right? So I would take a divided government over a one party on either side, right? I do think that the Democrats, at least right now, are very internationalist, very globalist, and are moving towards socialism much faster, which is why that does scare me even more if I had to choose between two evils. Because Republicans are the same. You're still going to move towards socialism. It's still going to be corporatist and all these bad entities running things and going the wrong direction. I would rather have a do-nothing Congress any day. I'd rather have a divided government at this point any day compared to a situation where you just have one side completely dictating to the other. That's what we have. And that's why I'm saying I've evolved. I don't want one-party rule, period. And that we basically have one-party rule no matter what. We have the uniparty. We're going in the same direction. No matter what, we get the welfare warfare state. And that's what I'm against. I'm against the welfare warfare state. I'm against interventionism, both abroad and domestically. That's what I want. I want divided government. I want non-intervention. And I invite the idea of a new party, whether it's a Patriot Party or whatever party, because I just feel like right now you just have these two clowns. I don't really see any good coming out of that. So it leads me to what some have proposed. I'm not saying I'm on board with this, and I am to an extent, decentralization.
We're not going to talk about that, are we? We're not going down that path, Aaron.
Decentralization, right? So
I understand.
And again, I'm not saying I'm all for it, but not 100%, but I am more in that direction if it comes to reducing the government, reducing the bureaucracy, returning as much power to the states and as much power to the cities and as much power to the people as much as we possibly can. I'm not saying it needs to happen overnight, but I'd rather get that in people's mindsets of decentralization, because that's what I'm saying. How do you continue the system where you have two factions just going back and forth, where I'm going to dictate my viewpoint to you guys and my policy to you guys, and I'm going to punish the people that went against me last time, and then we're going to push it on the other side. And I'm not talking about any kind of civil type of situation, because I'm always going to fall on the side of peace. I want as much peace as possible, but I think decentralization can push towards peace rather than pushing towards violence. To me, that is the more peaceful path. That status quo of the welfare warfare state, it only leads us down one dangerous path: financial ruin, economic collapse, and all the mass suffering that could come out of that. While I think decentralization, while not a utopian answer, can at least reduce the amount of mass violence and suffering that could come and that will come at some point, whether it's our grandkids or whatever. That's the path we're on. Hyperinflation, like you're saying, hopefully you don't see Venezuela here in your lifetime, or hopefully ever. But I'm sorry, if you're to look at the balance sheet, that is the path we're on. And we are, in a way, we're kind of held hostage anyways to keep the system we have, just because of all the financial obligations we have, whether it be Social Security, Medicare, retirement, whatever. We're kind of stuck on that anyways. But I'm just saying, at least get the mindset in people that returning power to the people, because that's where the power comes from. Where the power comes from us, they've stolen so much, that cabal has taken so much, the swamp has taken so much. And my point is, I think there's literally only a handful of people in Congress, 3 or 4, that have what I'm talking about in mind. It's a libertarian mindset, but there's only 3 or 4 that with that mindset out of 535. So, and zero in the executive branch. Right. So,
Well, yeah, and I think when you start talking about decentralization, I get it. You know, you see other places. You know, you'd rather be North America with maybe 17 different countries, vice you know North America with Mexico, Colombia, whatever, Canada, and then United States, and that makes sense. And there's a lot of validity to that thought process. And like I said, I don't decentralization is we have that's a whole nother show.
yeah, we could
Uh,
talk about it
just
next time for sure.
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. At the end of the day, I think that you are right in wanting less government. I think that's very important. I think that the need for the government to stay the hell out of our way, pardon my language, I hope we don't get FCC, but to stay out of our way and not get into the businesses of telling people how to run their lives is very, very critical. That's not what the government was made for. That's not what the government was built to do. But we have lost our way with that, and we lost our way with that years and years ago. It didn't happen with Obama. It didn't happen with Jimmy Carter. It didn't even happen with Eisenhower. It happened with Abraham Lincoln. It happened with, I mean,
FDR.
it happened a long time ago. People getting into your business and telling you how to run your life. And reality is that's going to continue. But it happens in all countries.
For sure.
Okay, there's not a single country that this doesn't exist. Okay, maybe unless you have your own little island off the coast somewhere and you're your own country, then you're good. But yeah, so decentralization is a good concept, and I like it. I like the thought of it. Uh, I like you said, I mean, this is not something that you'd have to have a whole lot of different discussions on, and there's a whole lot of questions that could come up. You and I were debating this just last night, I believe, and you told me, you said, John, I don't have all the answers. Okay, I'm just letting you know my thought process as I was sitting there giving you a hard time about it, but yeah, I
Well, I
agree
mean,
with.
I mean,
And
am I saying that my current position is 100%
no,
decentralization?
no, I know
Not
what you're saying.
necessarily, right? I'm just saying it's just again like the thought process where I'm just when I step back and look at the whole
Sure.
picture, like I'm talking about, you have these two factions, and they're just going back and forth, dictating one the other. And I totally sympathize with one of those factions for the most part. I definitely am not on the side of socialism, right? I'm not on that side, but the other side, and they still have their things that I'm not 100% on, right? So it's like I said, is that system sustainable? I don't think it is. And my question is, I think maybe decentralization might be a key because I am all about reducing government and less government, right? So that's still not exactly 100% decentralization, but it's in that direction. And do I feel myself moving there slowly? Yes, I do feel. But is it my 100%? This is how it has to be? No.
Yeah.
Do I want less government, reducing government, returning power to the people? Yes. Do I think decentralization is a means to get to that? Very possibly. But I don't have all the answers to that because I feel like that status quo will lead, like I was saying, to more mass suffering and violence one day. It could be our grandkids, but I just feel like we're on an unsustainable path. That's what I
Yeah.
feel.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and like I said, and a lot of people think that, and then there's a lot of other people that think the other way. You hear people talk about, we're better off in the United States than we ever have been.
For sure. Yeah.
Whether it's not, it just all depends on how you look at it, and what is it that you value, what is it that you hold important to you, and some people it's money, some people it's family, some people it's morality, and some people, it just all depends on how you look at things. But but reality is we are we are all humans. We are all people that are trying to figure out this thing called life. What is that Prince song or something like that?
I guess.
Anyways, but I do appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk with me, man. We've been talking about this stuff for quite a while now, and you and I always have a lot of different conversations, different kind of candid conversations, and there are times I like to play devil's advocate with you. But I do appreciate your views. I appreciate your honesty and your openness, and the ability for you to express those views. Not a lot of people can, especially as eloquently as you do. You're very educated on this stuff. Me, I'm a complete idiot when it comes to these things, and I had to sit there literally, just looking at a website earlier today just to understand who's on Biden's cabinet.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I mean, like some of them are, none of them have been confirmed yet, which let's be honest, they'll all get confirmed.
Of course.
But it's, you have a bunch of former Obama knights, and then you get like Buttigieg, in there, and you get a couple of these other new people that, are kind of new timers to it and everything like that. And you're right, we're just kind of perpetuating the cycle.
But I know one thing is that one of the shows I listen to every now and then is a very leftist show from a comedian, Jimmy Dore, and he's like a hardcore leftist socialist. And when he's complaining that those Biden cabinet members are all warmongers and corporatists, right? And it's coming from a guy from the pretty far left, then, I'm just saying, is that not a red flag? And in one way, and I've seen this on another show I was watching where they were saying the populist right and the populist left, they do have actually a lot in common. Like me, I would not call myself a radical leftist, right? But when this guy, Jimmy Dore, who's a radical leftist, is saying, why are we putting these warmongers and corporatists in the government, I 100% agree with him. You know what I'm saying? We right there, I 100% agree with this guy on the other side. You know what I mean? Like, even though he stands where he stands, me and him, I would shake his hand on that one. I totally agree with you. Why are we putting these corporatists and these warmongers, a lot of them from the Obama administration, but either way, it's people that represent the war machine and people that represent, those big corporate oligarchs I was railing about earlier. When a guy from the left is saying this, like, I agree with him, and I'm a guy from the right. You know what I mean? So yeah. We do have a lot of overlap, and that's why I do think dialogue and stuff can alleviate a lot of things for sure. But I do appreciate the things you said about me. I mean, it's a little flattering. I don't know if I'm as much of I'm more of a know-it-all than an expert, I'd say. Yeah. But I appreciate the words.
On it than I am. So, but let's I don't want to get into a deep discussion with this, but I just want to end with your thoughts and, just from, because you and I've talked a little bit about this, but I kind of want to hear what you have to say. 2024.
2024.
Who's your candidate that's going to take us into who's your Trump candidate? Because let's be honest, it's not going to be Trump.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a hard question because a lot can happen in 4 years, right? In 2012, was Trump on the list at all? At least, for me, for 2016, absolutely not. And there's some embarrassing ones I've had in the past where in like 2008, I was like, okay, for 2012, I'm really going for this Romney guy. It's like embarrassing to even say that, right? So looking out, so much stuff could change. I would say at the top of my list, though, if you put Glock 19 to my face and was like, pick now, I would say Rob DeSantis out of Florida governor. I would put him at the top of my list. I would put, who else? I mean, he's really the huge one. I've always been a fan of Ted Cruz, but he is very polarizing, so I don't know if he'd be the best. I like Rand Paul, but he ran a really crap campaign when he was running. The female governor of, I believe it's South Dakota. I can't Noam, I think is her name. She might be a good VP at least, I think.
I've heard the names. So all right. So who do you think the Republican Party? Because let's be honest, it's going to be we're not going to get to a third party. Patriot Party in 2024, that type of party. It's just not going to happen.
I mean, I don't know if that's 100% true, though. I think it's possible.
Well, and maybe this is for another show, and that's something to definitely talk about. But, let's be honest, a lot of people feel like that's what cost Bush the election, was that third party.
True.
And so reality is there are enough people out there that would vote for a third party that's not going to vote for the Republican machine, that's not going to vote for the Democrats, or is it just going to split those votes? And the Republicans and the Democrats are still going to rule. I don't know. That's
well,
an interesting,
very, very possible. But I think this is a time in history based on the fact that the Republicans gained so many new voters and people that hadn't been voting, to vote again, right? They retain that base. I just think it's a moment in time where if at any point there was going to be a time for a new party, at least in this modern age, I think the point is now. Now, you're probably right. It's probably not going to happen. But I wouldn't 100% say it's not going to happen. Because, again, we have 4 long years ahead of us. Yeah. Who knows what's going to happen just in general, right? And we'll see, right? We'll see. Do you want to throw out any names before we go?
You like the name I like to throw out. I do like Nikki Haley. I know you don't. And one of the reasons I do like her is, and reality is because as we start looking at a Republican Party, because I do truly think that it has to be a Republican candidate. It can't be a third party that's going to win the presidency, and to beat the Democrats. And reality is I'm not saying it has to be a woman, but there needs to be a woman on the ticket, and it's got to be better than Palin.
But why do you say it has to be? Why do you say it has to be? Why do you say it has to have a woman on the ticket? Just because that's the times we're living in?
Because of the times we're living in. The times we're living in right now. The fact of the matter is that we have a VP, first time ever, a woman as the vice president. And the natural progression. I'm not saying it has to happen in 2024, but reality is you're going to be running against Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
Whoever that person is going to be running against Kamala Harris. Do you really want the Republicans to put up a middle-aged? I'm not saying they will, because DeSantis is a great pick. I like DeSantis.
Yeah.
But a middle-aged white guy going up against a female, white or black, doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Okay. But a middle-aged male going up against a female in the 2024 election, it would.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, if it has to be a female, to me, I know you mentioned that I'm not a Nikki Haley fan. I think she's just establishment. I think she's a rhino. I don't believe in her at all. But I don't know if I guess what I want to say is, and this will be my last question, but when you're conceding the fact that, okay, well, we need a woman to go against this woman, are you saying that the Republican Party in general should move in a more progressive direction, right? Or should they stick with conservative principles, or should they stick with Trump principles? Because Nikki Haley's not a Trump candidate, whether she worked for him or not. She's not.
No, I know she's not, and I'm not saying the Republican Party should move into a progressive way. Away from conservative. Okay. I'm not saying that. I like Nikki Haley. Okay. I'm not saying that she is the best person for that party. Okay. I'm not, again. So we have to keep in mind though.
You're looking at optics.
The problem is this, man. I said it earlier about Trump. Okay. What Trump did was great, but that's not the world we live in anymore. Okay. We don't live in a world where people care about what you did for the country. People care about what you said on Twitter. People care about how you present yourself in a public forum and if you're a good person or not. That's what wins the election, unfortunately. Should it? No, it shouldn't.
Well, I mean, but we could push back on that, because you could say that people didn't, that Trump proved what you're saying isn't the case, right? Because he did all those things. And he won the first time, and he still garnered more votes than any other sitting president ever, whether he lost or not.
I don't disagree with you. I understand what you're saying.
Again, if he lost if he lost voters, then I'd say you're right.
I still think, truly think that well, we can go around about this all day long. And like I said, I'm not as educated as you are on this stuff. But reality is I believe in my heart that the Democrats gained votes because of Trump. And so if you try to play somebody on a Trump-style ticket that is a staunch Trump supporter that goes up there in 2024 with a MAGA hat on, it's not going to go well. I'm not saying they have to get rid of conservative values. I'm not saying that at all.
It's a matter of style, is what you're saying.
Yes, exactly. I would like to see somebody go up there with a Reagan hat on. You know, I mean, something that tells us that they're moving forward. Now, I don't know if it's Nikki Haley. I just like the way she's handled a lot of different things, and I think she is one of the. While she may be part of the establishment, I don't disagree.
Mm-hmm.
Then give me a female that could compete that isn't. But DeSantis is a good pick. Okay, I'm just saying if you're going to go up against a sitting vice president, unless they do something really, really dumb over the next 4 years, okay, which they could.
Absolutely.
You know, and there's a lot of thought that, guess what? It might not be Vice President Harris running for president. It might be President Harris running for re-election.
Yeah.
In 2024, right?
Yep.
And reality is what do you do to compete against a black female in this day and age? That's not an easy task. And putting up a middle-aged white man, conservative or not, is not going to do it. Okay.
Well,
that's my point.
We'll end on this final note of, I think the fight, at least in the primaries, is going to come down to two viewpoints within the Republican Party. It's going to be what you're saying, and that probably will represent a large group of people. But it's going to come down to what you're saying, and it's going to come down to we need a Trump-like candidate. Mm-hmm. So it's going to come down to a Trump-like candidate versus what you're saying, which I'm not even sure how to categorize that, but whatever.
What I'm saying is, you said it earlier. It's an optics. Mm-hmm. It's a how do we make people happy? I sent you a message, a couple days ago. Oh my gosh, the Broncos are in so much trouble. They hired a white guy as their GM. Worst thing ever. Not because people are racist or whatever. I hate that word with a passion. Okay, that is the buzzword of the day, though. It's, well, if you're not showing these optics, if you're not showing us that you can do X, Y, Z, then and stay with the times, then you're done.
And that's why I push back with it. To me, that's just succumbing to wokeism.
I disagree. When you say succumbing to the woke, I'm not saying that we should be like everybody should be out there and saying that, well, you have to hire a woman, you have to hire a black, you have to. Okay, that's because this is where we're going in life. That's what we're doing. I'm saying that the Republicans have to show the world that there are conservative females that have the ability to run for president. They have not shown that. They have not put one forward. And if you're going to compete against a 2024 candidate as Kamala Harris, now's the time to do it. It's not about being woke. It's not about being Black Lives Matter or whatever. It has nothing to do with that. Okay. This has to do, if you're going to compete, it's just like anything else, okay? It's like, it's a sports analogy. It's the best sports analogy I can give you, okay? The Lakers have a great basketball team. They have high-level people. They have high-level players. Well, other teams cannot compete with that unless they go get that same level of players, okay? Right now, the people have spoken, whether we like it or not. And yes, Trump got 74 million votes, but Biden-Harris got 81 million. Take Harris off that ticket. I don't think Biden wins this election. I truly, truly don't think Biden wins the election. Okay? People voted on optics.
I think you just went back on what you said earlier, because earlier you said it was an anti-Trump vote. So why would it matter if Harris was on the ticket or not if it was an anti-Trump vote?
Well, okay, you're right. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm not as smart as you are. But
No.
but at the end of the day, there's a mixture possibly. But I do think that the amount of votes that Biden got was supported by his vice president pick.
Even though
Okay.
that she was extremely unpopular, that she had to drop out of the first primary, she dropped out before the first primary because she lost all funding because she had no support. She was a completely failed presidential candidate.
I completely 100% agree with you, but do you really think that the primaries have anything to do with what the primaries are dictated by the Democratic Party,
Well, if the primaries,
just like the
well,
primaries are
well,
dictated by the Republican
yeah,
Party.
but if the primaries were to get the most popular candidate, at least on the Democrat side, it would have been Bernie Sanders.
But bottom line is this, Aaron, is that people don't vote in the primaries. They didn't put out a big vote primaries. Did you see a big vote push during the primaries? No. People don't vote in the primaries, okay?
I mean,
It's
people
not.
vote in the primaries. I mean, because
No, they don't.
even Trump had the most votes in the primaries than any other Republican in years.
Okay. That doesn't tell me that people don't. That just means that I could sit there and say, well,
I'll give you this: the people that are
last time I
more.
had 10, now we have 20.
But my point
That
is,
doesn't mean.
people do vote in the primaries. It's usually people that are more politically engaged,
Absolutely.
right?
We
Like,
don't have 80, we don't have 155 million politically engaged people in this country.
oh, of course not.
Okay. But that's how many people voted in the election. That's my point.
Okay,
Okay.
I see that.
Is you have 155 million people voted for the president of the United States. My daughter couldn't even tell you who Kamala Harris was until she was a VP. Okay. Why? Because she didn't pay attention to the Democratic primaries, but she did pay attention to the election.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's your difference. Okay. People don't care if she was a failed presidential candidate. People don't know she ran for president. I guarantee you could probably take 81 million of those people, and maybe 10% of those people could tell me who ran in the primaries.
Yeah, but I mean that again goes to back to the very beginning of this conversation. I was talking about the education factor and how people are
That's a,
not trained, I
I
guess,
don't disagree with you,
to
but
even understand the political process or the kind of government we're supposed to have, right?
in this day and age of Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, do you think people will ever get that kind of educated?
Not with the censorship. It's possible it's possible with social media to. It's not impossible, but with censorship, it's impossible. You know what I mean?
I agree with you. I agree with you, but at the same point, the minute you start talking about something that is a view that you don't believe, not you necessarily, not you specifically, Aaron. I'm speaking for the normal person here, okay? The minute people start talking about something you don't like, you shut off. There's so many times
That's
when
true.
when I heard Obama on the TV, I turned it off. Why? Because I didn't like him. I didn't like what he was saying. I didn't want to hear what he had to say.
Yeah.
Does that make me a good? No, that's stupid of me because now I'm uneducated about what's going on
Yeah.
because I wasn't listening. Okay. That is your normal person. They are not going to listen. So how are you going to educate somebody who doesn't want to listen? You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it's a pretty big deal. All right. So I agree with you, man. It's tough, but I do want to. I'm gonna go ahead and I know it's your show, so I'm gonna go ahead and let you close it out. But I do want to thank you again for letting me be here, and this was fun. I know that I probably sound like your listeners are gonna be like, your friend's a moron. but I do appreciate you taking the time and letting me be on here. And
Well, I really enjoyed having you on here, and we'll definitely do this again. This is not the last time. We'll do this for sure, as long as you're down with that. So, all right.
And you enjoy your time, and we'll chat sometime in the next couple days, I'm sure.
All right, for sure. You guys have been listening to the Aaron Burr broadcast on the Free Thought Doctrine.